Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another ITY video. Today I'm with David Tudehope. He's the CEO of Macquarie Telecom. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Alex.
So I thought I'd ask to you, in the traditional way, to ask you if you could please tell us about Macquarie Telecom, your range of products and services leading up through to your very recent rebrand. We can see the logo behind you. And then any career highlights you'd like to share.
Sure. Well, we started 24 years ago. We're one of the very first telecoms to enter the industry at the same time as Optus.
I remember those days, the deregulation of the telecommunications industry.
Yeah, it was challenging days. We're a real challenger brand in that environment, deregulating the industry, and in those early days we championed the deregulation of local calls. It was largely through our own efforts. Fixed to mobile calls were deregulated through a lot of efforts. So we're really proud of the work we did in terms of opening up the industry. There's still some work to go in that. And our business was focused around telecommunication services. Right up until about 2000, and at that time we launched data networking services, soon after data centres, and we had quite a revolutionary concept at the time that data centres would in fact become the centre of the network.
Ooh.
And I think today time has proven that's the case.
Absolutely.
But back then it was hard for IT managers because they were very proud of their own computer rooms, and the idea of letting go of things only appealed to the more innovative.
Sure.
And then we also launched a mobile service, MVNO service, in the mid-2000s, and we've grown that today, where we have 3 different mobile MVNO services.
Right, I didn't know that. There you go.
So that's got a pretty broad breadth of services, and also around the mid-2000s we launched our government business, where we provide cyber security services to federal government agencies.
So they need it with all those hack attacks out there?
They do. So that's kind of been our journey as a business. It's been a fantastic journey, but challenging all the way through. And just to finish your last part of your question, we have launched our new brands last week, and really recognised that our customers are 3 segments. They're business customers that are customers of our telecom business, medium to large companies. Second business segment is cloud services, Macquarie Cloud Services, and they're focused on the more tech-savvy businesses and software as a service companies and businesses bought in the web. And the third business for us is government, and Macquarie Government focuses on government agencies and is very much down the path of cyber security and cloud computing services.
Sure. Just off the top of my head, I'm just wondering if you supply any security services to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. We had the Prime Minister and Scott and the Treasurer saying it's all never been hacked, unhackable. So you probably can't say if you do, but
I can. They're not one of our customers.
Okay, yeah.
But because it's all on the public record.
Sure.
Yeah, but we do about 42% of federal government agencies
that's fabulous.
use us for cyber security, and our role there is protecting against viruses and hackers. So we check all the internet and all the email to make sure that there's nothing coming in from outside.
And I guess some of those Macquarie Telecom highlights you spoke about, the milestones, there must be your milestones too as the CEO of the company.
Yeah, it's a big part of my life going to Macquarie. But there's been a really nice core group of people who've come through the years with me, and we've got lots of 10, 15, 20-year veterans here.
Well, that's also a great thing to see, because you don't normally see that these days. All these millennials are job hopping, but when you have people staying in your business, that's a sign of loyalty and a sign that they know a good thing.
Yes.
So, you've been highly critical of the industry's performance in customer service. We all have telco horror stories, it's not an uncommon thing. And you've suggested that it can't go on, much like the situation facing the banking industry. So, do you really think that there is an impending crisis of confidence?
Well, I think there's on a few measures. I think the industry is at a critical point. If, as we know, as part of the election, if Labor had come to power, there would be a banking royal commission today.
And major changes to the NBN, which we'll get to. Yeah.
Indeed. Yet the telecom industry has 4 times the number of complaints to its ombudsman than the banking industry does to their ombudsman.
Well, that's
4 times
damning figures, very damning.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
There's also recently a Governance Institute report that rated the telecommunications industry as having the worst ethics in the view of a broad survey of Australians, of any business segment, and right down there just after the sorts of industries you wouldn't imagine. And I think there's a number of data points which says that we industry are in a very challenging position, and I think there's a risk that we take comfort from small percentage changes in figures rather than looking at the absolute position, which is we do a very poor job as an industry of looking after customers and giving them a good experience.
Well, presumably the telcos are taking their customers for granted.
I think it's actually worse than that. I think
Treating them with contempt.
Well, I think there's different sort of motivations, but the end point is that the end result for the customer is a very poor one.
Sure.
And I guess it's in that context we launched our new brand, because we wanted to bring to light that we've always been about the customer. It's been the heart of the business for 24 years.
I mean, a challenger brand to gain customer confidence
It's
and
been
deliver better
been a
customer
part of it,
service.
yes.
Yeah.
I'd say in the last 5 years, though, we've really
Accelerated?
We've accelerated that,
Yeah.
really doubled down on that, and embraced the new research that underpins the Net Promoter Score system.
Well, I mean,
out of the US.
that's
transformed our business even further. I mean, we've always been strong there, but it's moved us from being the best of a difficult industry
Sure.
to being, I think, a standout. And today, our Net Promoter Score is frankly at the level where plus 63 is way above not just our own industry, which is either side of zero and sometimes a tad more, but also now takes us to a place where we're with industries that you'd actually admire and enjoy being a customer of. It's one of the highest NPS scores in Australia, and based on reported ASX results, it's probably the highest NPS score in Australia of any industry.
Right, and so no doubt, I mean, I remember writing the article at the time when you announced you were putting the NPS score, the Net Promoter Score on your front page. I remember you were challenging your competitors to follow suit. Have any of them done so that you're aware of?
Well, I think the challenge for our industry, beyond the status that we're at today, is in terms of what's changing, is that obviously the industry is going through a lot of consolidation. What underpins that consolidation quite often is synergies, which is a nice way of saying cost reduction. And a lot of those cost reductions are driven by significant reductions in Australian staff and replacement with staff offshore in lower cost destinations.
And most of us as customers of a telco have experienced that, where we ring up and we're talking to somebody offshore. And sometimes you have to go through 2 or 3 levels if you're having a particular problem before you finally hear an Australian voice.
Look, I think sometimes there is the aspect of, for some customers, they struggle with the language piece, but I'd say that's a subset.
Much less of an issue these days, I guess.
I think
really.
so, because we're such a multicultural society.
Yeah, absolutely.
The real challenge in the offshore destinations is the staff churn. Because they're paid so poorly in these countries, the way they get ahead is by changing jobs. And they change their jobs happily for $1 an hour, even 50 cents an hour.
They lose all that corporate memory.
Correct. And it's not uncommon in these outsourced offshore call centres, or even the insourced offshore call centres, to have staff churn rates anywhere between 50 and 200%.
Yeah.
That's to say the person you're talking to is most likely to change jobs sometime this year, and they may have had a few months' experience with the employer.
No wonder they want to so slavishly follow the script. Unplug this, replug that. I've done all that before I rang you.
Well, quite often there is a little disempowerment, which I think you're talking about there, but the other part is the fact that they just have such massive turnovers of staff, and there's no exceptions to that.
Yeah.
There's such demand for people, and the culture in these countries is such that changing employers is considered very acceptable.
So what have you done in that regard to minimise that?
Well, from our point of view, we've focused our customer service here in Australia, and we've really used NPS as the driver for our business. What I mean by that is, I think a lot of people adopt NPS and add to their dashboard of things to watch.
Yeah.
The success for us in the last 5 years has been we've made it the primary guide, the primary compass in which we make judgments in our business and make decisions. And it's not just about the customer service people in Australia, which is, it's far more than that. It's in everything we do, we measure the customer experience. And because we do it in real time, we do a fast feedback loop to the individuals who actually did the survey, who serviced the customer. Fast feedback loop if it's a detractor score, so 0 to 6, to the supervisor who calls the customer. That fast feedback loop and that energy around NPS, and completely adopting the NPS framework, has been the key to our success.
Well, that's what's set it apart from just another number or another message, and that's what makes you say that this simple measurement tool has transformed your business.
It's extraordinary. I mean, my only regret, quite frankly, is I didn't do it 12 years ago.
Sooner.
12 years ago, I read the article. I did what a lot of people did, which I just added to my dashboard. And that's why I say with such confidence that it's only when we've made it the true compass of our business that we've had the spectacular improvement in customer service.
So, I mean, your onshore, your Australian, your call centre, is that in this building or where would it
So
be?
so our contacts, we've got two contact centres, one for the telecom business, which is in this building here, it's about 30 metres away, and one in our data centre near Central Station.
And I guess you must really celebrate the great customer service stories, because these are real tangible results that result from these changes to bring these customer people onshore and to really make this customer service a real commitment.
Yeah, that's a very important part of it. I mean, having people measured on it, having high visibility, but as you touch on there, recognition for great stories, and we have a system of heartbeat club stories where we really draw out some fantastic staff's service stories to inspire others, and we recognise people get. We have one award which is called we get 10 tens, and we have a huge recognition of someone get basically 10 customers in a row to give a score of 10 out of 10, which is bloody hard to achieve. There's a lot of customers who consider 9 to be an amazing score.
That's right.
We do 10 tens, and those epic awards, people find inspiring and encouraging.
Sure, and obviously the people around them want to achieve the same sort of...
They look and they go, look, I know my job as well as that person. Yet somehow it's not translating to customer survey scores, and they start reflecting personally on, well, maybe it's not what I'm doing, it's the way I'm doing it,
how I'm doing it,
and how I'm speaking to the person, and how I follow up and cycle back to them. It's just often those small things that makes a difference.
It's always the little things. I mean, that's a cliche, but it's so true. You were slighted by somebody on some little thing, and that's what you remember. People remember how you made them feel. That's that famous saying, not what they said to you.
No, spot on. And I think it's that growth from our NPS scores, our 50-point growth has been largely around that. I'd say at the early days we did do some significant systemic changes. There were some things that we were just not getting right. And things like pre-billing, checking the bill before it goes out.
I was going to say, what were some of those things?
So some of those systemic changes are really important. But once we got the systemic things fixed, it was more about the way we did things.
I mean, after you've got the computers churning out the right numbers, then it comes down to the people, and that's basically a very simple thing. And yet, we see so many companies just ignoring it or doing it wrong, and it all comes down to the customer.
I think the challenge, if I put my the shoes of some of the others who've done things differently, not just in our industry but others, is that having the pressure of trying to perform for shareholders in the short term means that the labour arbitrage position, even though the stuff are going to churn far more frequently offshore, like crazy staff churn, the immediate hit to the bottom line of doing a labour arbitrage and
it's damaging your brand.
Is such that it helps the shareholders in the short term. But I think that's right, but in the
long term,
line forward, even just like 2 years, eventually it becomes known to customers that what might have been a great customer service story in the past, where they ring up because something goes wrong, or they need to move house or move offices, so they have a reason to engage with you. They realise that it wasn't what it used to be, and then your brand starts to suffer. And
it's two more cliches. One, bad news travels much faster than good news, and the other one is around how it's very easy to lose customer trust, very hard to earn it. And it's also the other cliche, I guess, again, is that it's always much easier to sell to a customer that you've already got than to have to advertise and try and find a new one. And so this whole business about keeping, nurturing, loving your customers, well, if you're doing that, well, that's a great credit to you. And as you have said yourself, I wish many more people did it. Any further comments on that?
No, I think you've captured the essence of it. I think it's that short-term pressure versus the medium term.
Well, it's always better to look for the future and just tell shareholders to suck it up. That's what I would say.
Well, probably I'd put it
more diplomatically.
I'd say, saying to shareholders, look, yes, it might be more expensive employing Australians,
but it's worth it.
But if you get the service model right, because Australians by themselves is only part of it.
Sure, that's not the only factor.
If you get the model right, then there's a real reward for shareholders in terms of, because all the NPS research is such that happy customers stay, not surprisingly. Happy customers buy more.
Tell their friends how wonderful you are.
Exactly, tell their friends. What we found, probably 2 surprises that we didn't expect, which is in the research.
Please.
They also pay their bills faster.
Hey,
which
that's
kind of
good.
makes sense, doesn't it, right?
Everyone's always screaming that companies are taking forever to pay them.
If you're sitting there and you've got some bills to do, it's 5:15, they think the IT manager's thinking of leaving. You tend to pay the bill that you know is probably going to be correct. And they've done a good job for you. The bill that's kind of like full of errors, a bit tricky, there's always some complexity to it. You're more likely to go, I'll do it tomorrow when I get back.
And was there a second surprise?
I think the second surprise for us was that, frankly, we are less busy.
Hey, That's also good too.
If you fix it right the first time, it's just less phone calls, less emails, less escalations.
Better productivity, happier staff, happier customers.
Yeah, we're just less busy doing stuff because stuff gets fixed the first time.
Yeah, you're not putting out a dozen fires because you didn't do the right job in the first place.
Right, you're not having lots of emails and meetings as you resolve some issue that could have been resolved if you got it right at the beginning.
I mean, that's not doing this is the recipe for make work and look busy and fire putting outing, which is not very good English, but yes. So let's get on to the competitive environment in the telecommunications markets in Australia. What's your view, and how does the industry consolidation change the landscape? We're always consolidating. It's sort of like a cycle backwards and forwards.
Yes.
But you've been at the general surveying the landscape for quite some time. So
I think the answer is probably partly in your question, because it has for 24 years been a cycle of consolidation, and new businesses grow and carve out their own place. And I think it's a dynamic, fun part of the industry, along with the changing technology. It's what we're here for. I mean, we've been very true to one segment, and we love medium to large businesses, we love medium to large government, we love tech businesses that are in that same sort of genre.
yeah,
Businesses that are big enough businesses, but typically often lack the depth of IT skills to do everything themselves, and that's the market we've targeted. I think what's arisen is businesses in the consolidation phase who do everything from the smallest consumer all the way through, in theory, to the largest government or corporate business. I think one of the lessons of our own business is that it's almost impossible to do all those segments really well, in my opinion.
yeah.
There is
Spread too thin.
and I think it's very hard to actually build a model around the needs of those customers, just so different to one another. But having said that, there's obviously been many success stories across the industry, but it's changing all the time, and certainly a big part of my life is making sure we identify new innovation.
Absolutely. And so then there's of course the NBN. What are your views on how it is shaping up, and are there the proverbial potholes in the road ahead?
Look, we've been big supporters of the NBN since it started. We still are big supporters. We think it's critical for Australia for all the right reasons. I mean, I couldn't imagine Australia without an NBN. We saw how slow the private sector was to roll out high-speed broadband before the NBN came along, and we gave it 20 years for that to happen. So the fundamentals are all right. Like everything, it's about the execution of it,
Yes.
and the speed and the way it's executed. And I think there's been many good decisions made in terms of in that process, and there's a good team running NBN. I think the challenge right now, of course, there's been two challenges coming up. One is around, unsurprisingly for me to say this, the customer experience. And NBN needs to recognise that that flows through to the retail service providers.
Sure.
If they do not execute well or don't communicate well with the end user, then that all flows through to the retail service provider.
Well, there's two people to blame. One's the retail service provider, and the other is the NBN company, because they're all related, and so the bad experiences of one retailer can tarnish the NBN company when that shouldn't be the case.
Yes, and I think the second part of it is there are definitely some challenges emerging in terms of the whole poise and the aggregation and backhaul. I think probably a more complex issue, but definitely some real challenges emerging there, and something we're working through with the NBN company.
And you must already be well connected into various parts of NBN backbone across your data centres and.
Yeah, look, NBN is really important. It's still obviously a small portion of our base, just statistically it is, and we've been business focused, but it clearly going to grow significantly over the next year or two.
And are there some great customer stories that you'd like to share?
Well, each of our businesses has some good stories. In our cloud services business, one of my favourite customers, because we've grown together, but they're just such an outstanding business model and leadership team, is Webjet.
Oh yes, I see their ads on TV quite.
Yeah, they've grown from a dozen people when we first met them in St Kilda Road, led by David Clark, to being a business that's nearly $500 million in revenue.
Major.
Still, to their great credit, have a modest number of people, but it's very tech based, very focused on the user experience, and they've been a great customer. It's been great seeing them grow in that time, and we've supported them from an infrastructure point of view and allow them to grow without having to add hundreds of people. Yeah,
well, that's the important thing if you're trying to use technology to dramatically boost your
And
productivity.
that's straight true to their tech business nature. Then I think in the government space, we've done some really good work there as well. I mean, it's a very busy place, cybersecurity, and
Yeah.
we get something like about 1.2 billion events a day.
Yeah.
And our job is to turn those 1.2 billion into a much smaller number of events that we look at more closely. And it's a fascinating place. We work very closely with the Australian intelligence agencies and defence and law enforcement, and it's been one of those businesses that has been very important for our government clients, but frankly as an organisation it's really matured our security and capability. Because we just have a unit that thinks about security.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, the antivirus companies have these R&D centres, these threat security cyber centres staffed, 24/7, looking at all of the things. Of course, at a much, to do with signatures and individual files and ransomware. But you must have quite a team of cyber security experts that are crunching these things all the time.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot about big database work. It's about correlation analysis, and it's quite a different sort of a business in some ways. That makes it also very interesting.
Sure, and obviously they're also protecting all of Macquarie's own assets and keeping it safe from the hackers too. So I always like to talk about the future. I mean, we know the NBN is the future and it's coming, and we hear about all sorts of fibre connectivity. Sorry about that, fibre and wireless, and there's advancements in mobile fibre technology, and 5G is on its way. But where do you see the market in a decade's time, especially around the customers that you're targeting and looking after?
Yeah, well, I think all our businesses are involved in the cloud computing space. We think about it a lot. Certainly, what the decision we made some time ago was the market was going to move to hybrid IT.
Yeah, and that's a buzzword you hear all the time now from all the players.
A couple of years ago, there was a bit of a view that the offshore public clouds will be the future. I think it's a recognition now that re-platforming application to go on those public clouds is not time and cost efficient.
Sure. And there's also the security concerns. Companies, governments want you to store your data in country.
There's that aspect, and also there's the issue of the Hotel California, the fact that
Yes.
proprietary APIs and
That's it.
your applications are going to leave.
Yes.
I guess we've made the call that we're going to embrace the hybrid IT, actually, rather than being evangelists for one type of cloud.
Yeah.
And that's what
That way you can be platform technology agnostic and serve the needs of your customers, whatever they're using.
That's our thinking, and that's certainly where the market is today. I think there's a great recognition now from the analysts. They're now talking hybrid IT rather than just one particular technology.
Yeah.
And we're in the co-location business with lots of data centers, space, capacity, so the tier 3 end. We've got significant private cloud service heavily focused on VMware because we love the fact that customers can move their workloads into VMware and out again, like it's portable workloads, and we think that's the future. And we completely embrace the connectivity to public DIY clouds. So that has served us well. I think in the cybersecurity space, it's moving so quickly. The threat metrics are moving so quickly, but we are, like I said, because of the volume of transactions we have, we've got a great insight into that and a great database to have an Australian perspective on the cyber threats.
Yeah.
In a way, people who have a smaller footprint don't. And I think because we operate at the more sort of sophisticated end of the cybersecurity space, I think we've got good access to some of the smartest people, some of the smartest operatives in that industry to understand what's relevant for our customers.
And you mentioned, co-location. I mean, you must be working with some of the major data center players in Australia, but presumably you have your own data centers too, which are hardened and.
We do.
Yeah. And in this building or out, in various parts of Australia.
Yeah, we built 2 data centres in Sydney, one at Central Station, the original one from 2000.
Yeah.
We've got a very large one out at Macquarie Park, and they're 15 kilometres apart, so a very nice story there. It seems to really tap into a market, a dynamic around sort of active on dark fibre. And we have a data centre in Canberra for the federal government.
Yes.
That's very focused on security.
They'll get great latency there. It's right next to them.
Yes.
So I always like to get towards the end of the interview and ask if you could please share the best piece of advice that you've ever received that's helped you to get where you are today.
Well, I think the best advice has changed over time.
Yeah.
The advice you get when you're at school is different to the one at
Sure,
university.
Absolutely.
Work. I think when I started in the business, when I originally started in banking, but when I first moved from banking into start this business, I read this. I was in a library by myself for some reason, and I was doing some work, and there was a book sitting on my desk, and from the previous person, and it was a biography of US President Calvin Coolidge.
Ah.
And instead of doing what I should have been there at that time,
You started reading.
Yeah. And I found a fantastic quote from Calvin Coolidge about the importance of persistence.
Yes.
And that persistence is everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's more important than brilliance. It's more important than intellect. It's the most important thing.
Sure.
And that was so powerful in those early years when we had so many challenges and we didn't have any money. We were a startup, just with individuals' own savings. We had, very large and quite ruthless competitors in Telstra, there was plenty of challenges and plenty of sort of setbacks. And that persistence quote was one that I used to actually even carry in my wallet.
Yes.
For those first few years.
There you go. And so, what advice would you be following now after all these years of success that is still powering you today beyond persistence, if you can think of one?
Yeah. Look. I think that the thing I've come to learn is business is growing and. It's even more important. It's just how important the right people are.
Yes.
Which starts with the right leaders and managers, but then the right people as individuals as well. And I see a big part of my job is it's about innovation and working out what the next trend is, which is the fun part. Yes, it's about regulation and trying to make it a better industry.
And it's about rallying your troops, leading them.
Yeah, and I found in that last point, the key, if you get the right people and the right leaders, so many things just take care of themselves.
Yeah, well, you've built the right foundation, and so it's not wobbly later on when you're trying to go to build extra stories. And just quickly on Telstra's ruthlessness, back in the Optus days, I was working for a telecommunications company called First Netcom, which perhaps unwisely had added elements of network marketing into their plan. And so you got 5% off all locations, from 5% off all calls to all locations at all times, and for business it was 7% off. And if you sign people up in a network marketing style, you could make money from their bills. And I just remember Telstra would send us customer bills, but they would send them on individual floppy disks. So we had boxes and boxes.
Yeah, they were so helpful. That was exactly the same for us. They had no favourites amongst the wholesalers.
Oh no, yeah.
All were equally unwelcome in those days. But things have improved a bit since then. The challenges are different, but there's still challenges. Look, I'd say the biggest difference, and you'd recall from your early days, is that you were competing against Telstra, which is sort of like the boy at high school whose dad sort of owns the whole universe.
Yeah.
Like they had every customer, money beyond imagination, and it was owned by the government, and then by large organisations. And then you had Optus, which was the child that just kind of had the mogul parents. It's had a series of parents, but each of them has had money also beyond your imagination. Usually offshore parents, but still, they're overseas parents. There were still extraordinary amounts of money to invest. And I think in your kind of the kid who just has his lunch money and what he can borrow from or save from odd jobs or whatever. So I think it brings out a different sort of character. It
does. Well, you got to be something special. Tenacity, persistence, as you said, to really make it amongst that kind of competition. And it's like it's not rags to riches, but it's still, that's that kind of feeling and sentiment where you've really succeeded.
A different starting point in the race.
Yeah, that's it.
One person started the finish line, one person started sort of well endowed.
That's it.
Halfway down the track, and you sort of start at the finish line.
At the starting line. Yeah. So, do you have any final messages for ITY viewers and readers, and for your current and future customers, but also any final message for your competitors?
Oh, look, I think it's a great industry. I mean, I've been fortunate to be working with mentoring a number of young students at New South Wales Uni, and one of the reflections they say is you've been a long time in the industry, longer than they are old.
Yeah.
And my reflection it's because it's such an innovative and fun industry. It's so dynamic and changing. It's actually an industry you want to be in.
Yeah.
And that's why I think 24 years later I'm in the industry, because whatever I talk about today, in 2 or 3 years' time, we can be different.
Yeah, or it will be something that was coming, which we're now taking for granted and using as though it had always been part of our lives, and we can't imagine being without it.
Very true.
Well, David Tudehope, CEO of Macquarie Telecom, thank you very much for your time. Congratulations on the new logo and business success, and I do hope to talk to you again in the future.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us wherever you are on the planet these days. We have a true international session for the next few minutes. I had a great pleasure of presenting virtually, of course, the CEO of the Year Award at the World Communication Awards recently. And I'm joined today by the winner of that accolade, David Tudehope, CEO of the Macquarie Telecom Group. So that we can find out a little bit more about Macquarie and in particular, a little bit more about David himself. So welcome, David, and thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Cormac.
So let's kick off with you set up Macquarie Group about 28 years ago, I think. What motivated you to do that, and was it actually what you thought it would be?
Yeah, look, it was. We started the hard way back in as I guess what's now called a tech startup, and it was a handful of people, and we had big dreams, very little resources, and we were competing with a large government monopolist that was in the process of being deregulated. So it was it was pretty challenging. It was sort of, but what it did teach us was the importance of customers, the importance of being frugal with our expenditure, and the importance of hiring the right people. So really, the basics of business were we learned from a very, very beginning.
And one of the principles that Macquarie has always been to serve markets that are underserved and overcharged, I think, in your opinion. How has this approach sort of helped the company get from the startup phase into the large organization that is today?
Yeah, look, it's been really the heart of who we are. Our company purpose, our why we exist, is to make a difference in markets that are underserved and overcharged, and it's kind of been the compass which we've run our business. We've looked for those sort of markets. We've found them in telecom and elsewhere, and it means also the way we approach business is quite different, particularly in our sector. But it's it's been our compass through the last 28 years.
And alongside that, there's been a huge emphasis. You can see it wherever you look at your company on customer experience. Net Promoter Score is one of your sort of KPIs, etc. Do you see a strong link between that kind of focus and the financial performance and valuation of your business?
Yeah, we do. For us, customer experience has been the heart of our business, and then of course, as almost everyone knows these days, Fred Reichelt created the Net Promoter Score research and the model that appeared in that famous Harvard Business Review article all those years ago. We adopted it a couple of years later, and it's been the one measure that matters in our business. And there's the power of one single number is extraordinary in terms of focusing the organisation, having one truth, and with that, we've been able to adapt the business, adapt what we do, how we sell it. And it's really kind of enabled us to sort of fine-tune the business on a real-time basis. It's frankly transformed our business. And if I had one regret, my only regret really is I didn't adopt it. When I first read the article, it did take me a few years before I adopted it, but thankfully about a decade ago, I started that journey. Excellent.
Now, we couldn't have a conversation these days without mentioning COVID. I mean, this year, COVID has changed the way we work and think and operate, not just in the office and commercial environment, but at home and friends and family. And it's touched us all in many, many different ways. How do you think that's affected life in Australia, business and work in Australia, your company, customers, that whole environment in 2020?
Yeah, look, in Australia, it's like the rest of the world. It's probably accelerated trends that were always there. First of all, it's meant that, of course, people are working from home, and telecoms has been more important than ever. Reliability is critical. We're in the business to business market, so for us, it's about our customers, staff working from home, and without the immediacy of the IT help desk they have in the office, they really are dependent upon telecoms like never before. And customer experience now becomes much more personal. It's not just about the IT department. It's actually about you, your home, and you're trying to reach out to a customer, to a co-worker, and the telecom services are not working, or they're glitchy, or the videos aren't clear, or you can't hear them. And the pain that comes with that we've found has just accentuated the customer experience issue, and it's now more vivid than ever. In a way, maybe in the office it was something obscured by so many other moving pieces. So we've felt this really accentuated the customer experience. That's been one of the most dramatic impacts of COVID. The other part, of course, is that customers are moving to the cloud even faster than they were before. It's really accelerated those trends. And for many of the IT managers that would of course agree with you that the future is cloud or the future is IP telephony, or suddenly now it's like the idea of hosting their own IP telephony unit on site, or the idea of hosting their own data center and servers on site suddenly is no longer attractive, and third-party data centers and cloud is the future. So we've just seen that trend accelerate extraordinarily, and COVID has no doubt brought the future forward.
Just expanding on that a little bit, one of the concerns we've seen over here, certainly in my territory here in the UK or in Ireland, or even in the wider European space, is I totally agree with you. The telecoms industry, the technology industry has adapted and moved very quickly to this and enabled the rest of the world. I mean, I dread to think what this situation would have been like less than 20 years ago, for us to operate like we do today. But one of my concerns, very interested in your opinion, is that everyone then thinks from a telecoms, digitization, network infrastructure point of view, we're all good. And all the investment and focus in recovering needs to go into other things. Now, clearly, it does need to go into health services and rebuilding of jobs, for example, and so on. But is there a danger that we might, particularly at a government level, take our eye off the ball of investing in this digital infrastructure, continuing to make it better, faster, more ubiquitous than it is today?
Look, I think there's always that chance. I think these days, though, that the ordinary citizen is so tuned in to what can be done digitally. They have such incredibly good experiences with their social media apps, with the apps they use just to live life, means that they now really expect a lot from the government in terms of what can be done. They also expect a lot from corporate customers as well. I mean, the idea that, that a corporate, you've got to ring up to get something done is the only means to do it, or the fact that the website is clunky and difficult to use. I mean, these are no longer things that customers will accept in the same way they might have even 5 years ago. So I think all that translates to an environment where with expectations higher and where there's switching risks in the case of business, or in the case of government land, there's a risk that government, of complaints. I think that will always, feed into a level of investment now that we wouldn't have had some years ago.
Now, much has been said about the national broadband network in Australia. Now that you're sort of, less than 12 months from completing the rollout of this, do you believe NBN will deliver on those promises and expectations that it created?
Yeah, the National Broadband Network, these days called the NBN, had a long journey to this point. It was a policy of a previous government. The government changed. There were some lost years as they sort of reviewed that net program. But wind forward to today, the NBN network, to the great credit of the team leading the NBN, which is a government-owned enterprise, to their great credit, is 12 months from completion. That's to say that the vast bulk of Australians will get either fibre to their premises, their office or their home, or they'll be using a cable TV coaxial network to the home, or in the case of remote parts of Australia, they'll be using an NBN satellite. And the broadband they're accessing is, quite typically 10 times the broadband they would have previously. Sometimes it can be even more, up to 100 times for a slight premium. So just the bandwidth increases with a large continent like ours, it's just been spectacular. And frankly, it's really been the key to, sort of productivity through COVID, is that not only can people work from home, but they can work from home effectively because they're getting the sort of broadband speeds that, frankly, many corporates don't provide to their end users because of oversubscription. So, it has been, I think, the COVID period has really highlighted that in a country like ours, indeed, I imagine almost every country in the world, but in a particular country like ours, the geographic spread, how important it is to have high-speed broadband at an affordable price.
So let's just bring it back around a little bit to you and your role, if I may. As I mentioned in the introduction, you won the CEO of the Year award. Congratulations on that, a tremendous achievement. What qualities do you think are key to being a successful CEO in the digital age, in the digital industry today?
Well, Cormac, first of all, thank you so much for your comments at the prize giving. I was truly humbled by it. I'm not the kind of person who promotes himself in the way some other CEOs do endlessly. So for me, this was an honour, but also something that was quite unexpected. From my point of view, I mean, this has been my career. I mean, 28 years in the industry, that's a long time. Unfortunately, I didn't start when I was 7, so it is a big chunk of my life. And look, it does mean a lot to me, so thank you. And I think for me, it's been a long journey from a startup to a medium-sized company to a large company. It's been a journey where we've just really focused on becoming very good at the customer experience and being trying to be the very best at that. And we really did it from the very beginning. Set ourselves to be. We wanted to be, frankly, best in the world. And I know and for an Australian company, that's very aspirational. For I think for a US company, it probably is comes out quite naturally. But for an Australian company, we don't tend to think of ourselves as best in the world, even though we often are in certain areas. But that was the goal we set ourselves. And our inspiration was always outside the industry. We looked at industries which were famous for customer service. And that's really kind of been the 28-year journey for us. And we've just tried to really make that in everything we do and become the compass that guides our business. We've had a lot of challenges, but the key we've found is if we can adapt faster than others, then we'll be successful. Obviously, we were the smallest, and while we're now a large player, we still need to adapt very quickly. We've never lost sight of that need to maintain our sort of entrepreneurial, fast adaptation, innovation roots, but also to combine it with the public company we are today, and good risk management and good corporate governance, all those things, and trying to find the balance between the two, I think is the key to our success, and certainly has been in the recent years.
And we talked earlier about customer experience being at the heart of what you do. So let's not forget that in the World Communication Awards, Macquarie also won the Customer Experience Award. So again, congratulations for that. But you won it for a thing called the Heartbeat Program. Explain to us what was the inspiration behind that? What is the program, and what difference has it made?
Well, it was the power of storytelling. I will share with you the inspiration came from the hospitality industry. And the insight we gained there was that there was industry which paid people typically close to the minimum wage, and they were serving people in hotels, luxury hotels, that earn the levels of remuneration they might earn what they might earn in a year. These people would take a whole lifetime to earn. So how do you, in that environment, you're serving someone totally different, be creative in the way that you respond to challenges when there's some service failure, but also to delight where things go well, and look for the opportunities to delight. And that was the inspiration for our program. We really drew on that industry. And the Heartbeat program was about how do we find those stories that will inspire others. And the human nature is such that storytelling is so incredibly powerful and so memorable. And so what we really looked for in the Heartbeat program was to find stories of people doing ordinary things, if you like, doing their job, but doing it extraordinarily well. And that's the magic. And looking for those opportunities to delight, to make that personal connection with a customer. It might be something very personal, like someone getting married or someone having their first child, or might be something very corporate, like we've finished the rollout of a data network, or we've finished the implementation of a cybersecurity internet link. all these things are often significant projects. People spend a lot of time talking together and capping it off at the end, and then sharing that story with others. So they go, wow, it was really, the person was fundamentally doing their job, but the way they did it, the way they looked for opportunities to delight, I could do that. That's not hard. In fact, when I look back, you look at your co-workers, you go, actually, those opportunities have been there in the last few years. I just didn't recognize it. If I did recognize it, I didn't act on it. And we just constantly share those stories. I know the team took the opportunity to submit a few hundred of them to the World Communications Award. It was something a bit unusual. And just to demonstrate, it wasn't just a couple of happy stories, which every business has a few happy customers, with carefully scripted references that are polished by the marketing department, but raw customer feedback that generated the stories that then we shared internally. And we share those stories not just at company conferences or in fancy publications, but we share them every week or two. We have a story come out and we pump it right across the company. We do it in writing, verbally, and people draw a lot of inspiration from that story, particularly new people in the business. And that's really the essence of our Heartbeat program, Cormac.
Fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing. Final question, David, kind of a two-part bit. As an award-winning CEO, as a successful startup business creator, as a successful business leader over the last almost 3 decades, if you could go back those 28 years, what advice would you give yourself when you were starting out, or what did you wish you'd known then that you know now?
Yeah, interesting. Look, I think I started out, I was probably a little conservative, and that's been a good thing for the business in many levels, because we've been a little bit prudent in the way we run our business. But I think probably early on, I might have taken even more chances than I did. I mean, clearly we're entrepreneurial. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. But our entrepreneurialism was probably always anchored in a level of financial prudence around credit management, around cost management, and I think probably in hindsight one could have probably taken more risks. But then again, maybe if some of those risks might not have come to pass. I think the other part is that when you start up initially, Hollywood tends to sort of fast forward from the very beginning to the sort of when you're successful. It's sort of the bit in the middle is sort of is often not that interesting in Hollywood. In reality, though, however much time and money you think is going to take to build a business, it always takes more. And unfortunately, we only started the business with our own personal finances, like just the money we had from working elsewhere as individuals. This is the days before private equity and angels and all these things that are around today, and at least in Australia anyway. And so for us, we had to really make sure that every customer was profitable, every customer could pay their bills, and we had to make sure every customer was delighted by amazing customer experience, because that was our marketing program, was referrals. So there were sort of the things that really, on one hand, gave us great strength as a business, but I think Cormac had also probably acted as probably a little bit of a handbrake on the business, because we just had to be so sensible in the way we grew. But if you stick it for 28 years, you do build momentum, and certainly today we are entrepreneurial and can afford to make calculated risks far more so than we did back then.
And the second part of that question was then, for people looking to do what you did today, going forward, in addition to what you said, what would you see as different? What do you think they need to focus on, do, not do? What would be the advice?
Well, I've got a tech sector lens. One of the things I think that was critical to our success, and look, everyone in our tech sector would know this, but it's the need to constantly innovate. But the challenge is you can't pick every innovation. So you've actually got to make choices. And how do you find the time to work out what technology is going to be critical to your business success, and what's just kind of really interesting? And one of the things we've done for the 28 years almost is we've taken a bit of a Noah's Ark of people in different roles through the business, and we've invested a few weeks talking on one or two technologies or emerging issues in the industry, and travel usually to the UK or the US and sometimes elsewhere, and just spent a few weeks of concentrated thinking around one particular area. And almost every bit of innovation and every change in our business has come through that. And we did that not just today, but when we were a very small startup, as well as that long journey in the middle between small and large. And that has been really key to our success, because there's so much hype in our industry, which is kind of fun and interesting if you're in the sector. But on the other hand, it can be very distracting, and you can be pulled too many directions. So I think a big part of it was the concentrated thinking time, but bringing with me in that journey, not just a couple of executives, but someone from product, from marketing, from engineering, from operations, and having that lens on an issue, we've found often brings out the best results. And there's been a few times we've actually come away from one of those innovation study trips and in fact decided not to do something. And I think that's almost the best test of the effectiveness of those trips, because having the courage to actually not do something, as by how much hype there is in the industry on it, is actually, I think, a test that there's a real rigor to the way you look at technology. And obviously the vast majority of the time we have done something, but there's been a significant minority where we haven't. And that process of concentrated thinking with a diversity of people has been also critical to our success.
David, fascinating session spent talking to you. Thank you very much indeed for evening your time in Australia, morning my time here in the UK, and for wherever anybody else is who's watching us today. It has been a fantastic session. Thanks for letting us into your home, into your head, into a few of the ideas of David personally as well as professionally. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed for your insights, and look forward to catching up with you again sometime soon. Take care.
Thank you.
The Melting Pot. Hosted by Dominic Monkhouse.
Welcome to The Melting Pot, episode 2. I'm Dominic Monkhouse, and today I'm sitting down with David Tudehope, CEO of the Macquarie Telecom Group in Australia. He co-founded the business back in 1992 and now serves as CEO of a publicly listed business in Australia, turning over $200 million. Since its inception, the business has been obsessed with delivering great customer service, and he's going to tell me how he got the business to where it is today. It's one of the best in Australia. In fact, not just in Australia, but with their high levels of Net Promoter Score, they are one of the best services businesses in the world. He's going to tell me how they got there, how they keep there, and also how he's reworking his business model to find a way to attract younger workers.
Hi Dom, I'm David Tudehope, CEO of Macquarie Telecom Group.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. There's a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. One is the customer service journey that you've been on, and the other is what other people might see as the sort of challenge of hiring graduates or millennials, which I know you've got an interesting take on. Maybe we start with customer service. Tell me the story, like where are you, where have you been, how long did it take?
Look, our journey started when the business was founded 25 years ago, and we focused from the beginning on customer service. The challenge we had was that our original business was a telecom business, and while we're the best in our industry, we're the best of a bad bunch. And about 10 years ago, there was a famous article in the Harvard Business Review, which was around the research that later formed the Net Promoter Score. And I saw it and I thought, that's so powerful. The idea of one number to measure what we've been doing for many years, a number you can compare to others, and a number gives that clarity that you can work towards a goal. And I remember at the time I sent it back to my marketing department and said, this is exactly what we need to do. This can replace that 50-question survey that we send twice a year. And the note came back and it said, David, because we're aware of this, and we're going to add it to our 50-question survey with the 51st question. And I wrote a note back and I said, but it's supposed to be the ultimate question. The one question has the highest correlation with whether a customer stays, buys, and refer their friends. Shouldn't we replace the whole survey? They said, no, we're tracking all these things. It's more complicated than that. And I guess in the spirit of empowerment, I let it go and moved on to lots of other things. In hindsight, it's one of the greatest mistakes I've made in my career, because About 2 years later, I was invited to a breakfast from one of the authors of what had then become a textbook, The Ultimate Question. I was visiting Australia for a short time, and once again, he brought it to life. He told some case studies, ran a few videos, and I was so inspired. I came back, I said, guys, this is the ultimate question. This has the highest correlation with the things that we most care about. This is the one thing we should measure. We should get rid of all the other measures. And the same sort of reaction. But I said, guys, this is it. And we made that change, as you know, CEOs can do, and it has transformed our business over the subsequent 8 years. And I believe the reason why it's transformed our business is that it's taken something we've always been the heart of who we are, having a great customer experience, but it's given us a number to measure it by. And I think the problem before NPS came along, there were so many questions and so many ways of interpreting it that you had almost too many data points, and people could pick and choose the one that fitted their own preferences and their own views. But when you have one question and one number that is the answer end of it, you can really focus and energise people around that. And the last 8 years it has transformed our business, and we've seen the customer experience improve dramatically. We measure over half of our completed transactions. We measure our entire customer base a couple of times a year, and we have an early warning of drop-offs in customer service that we can address rather than waiting for it to come back through customer buying decisions. And we're most importantly able to, because we've got such a high sample rate, enable our staff to make great choices around how they can improve the customer experience, how a supervisor can improve the customer experience, rather than it being about what management can do. Because they have the data, it's real time, we share it immediately with the staff member. A few seconds after the survey is completed, the NPS result goes to them, and it's inside the team they can see it as well. So it's been very powerful. We measure nowadays 8 different key touch points that determine the customer experience, and I just wish I'd adopted it 10 years ago when I first saw it, and it's reimagined, I believe, our business in an industry that is in our market notorious for very poor customer service. We've made ours business today, and this is 8 years in the making, not just to have the best customer experience in our industry, which we kind of always had, but it was best of a bad bunch, but now the best customer experience of any public listed company in Australia in any industry, bar none.
What is your current Net Promoter Score?
So when we started the journey, it was plus 14, which was the competitors were sort of negative at the time. By no means a great score. This is 8 years ago. We grew it to about 4 years ago, around the plus 30 mark, and then we've since grown it further towards our goal, which we set ourselves originally, which was an ambitious goal at the time, of plus 50. And then we hit the plus 50 goal much faster than we expected once we set that, and then we're now today at plus 69 for the whole company, and 2 of our business units are at plus 83.
World class, alongside Apple and First Direct, one of the UK's telephone banks. What are the type of things that the team does? Because quite often people look at the score,
Yes.
They do their survey, they publish their survey, but they don't do stuff to change the score. What are are there some things that have, along the way, you think, we did that and it didn't work, or we did that and it really made a difference to the score?
In the last 2 years, I've started talking to people like yourself, Dom, and sharing our journey. And what I've learned when I've had the conversations is that the majority of people that adopt Net Promoter Score do not adopt all of it. They adopt the bits they feel comfortable with, and the bits they feel uncomfortable with, like the transparency of the data, like the fast feedback loop within 24 hours, things like this, they don't adopt. And I think it is one of those systems where to get real benefits from NPS, you have to be all in. You have to adopt the whole methodology, and you have to be absolutely determined to execute to that. It can't be simply as we did initially for the first couple of years, another dial on the dashboard, which you can pick and choose whether you like the number or not. And I think that's why you do see people thinking, well, I tried NPS for a couple of years and nothing changed. Well, adopting NPS will change nothing by itself. It's what you do around it. Now, I guess the other part of your question is the execution, and in our journey initially, there were a number of things that were significant items around systems or processes that we needed to do centrally, and we got some good wins that got us from the plus 14 to the plus 30s. But when we hit the plus 30s, what we found was that central programs to improve customer experience were actually becoming increasingly counterproductive, despite all the goodwill. And I believe the reason for that is as your customer experience starts becoming very strong, as it is at plus 30, because the scale is minus 100 to plus 100, so you're well above the norm. Often the levers you deal with centrally in a significant corporate, what you improve with one hand, you kind of have an impact somewhere you hadn't fully appreciated that actually takes the experience down somewhere else. And in fact, the dials become more finer, and you need to tune them more carefully, and it's very hard to do that centrally. So what we've found is that the people who really took us from the 30s to the 50s to the 60s have in fact been the frontline staff and their immediate managers, who can change those dials, who can change the way we interact with customers, can change the empowerment and the decision process around small things that are often quite impactful on the experience. And that's what's got us to the next level. But the only way you can do that, of course, is with having very high sample rates.
On the sample rates, I know that's a conversation that we've had before. Have you got some top tips about fixing your people's low sample rate?
There's a few ways of doing it. Certainly, transparency helps enormously, because they quickly realise that if they don't have a high sample rate, one or two scores for individual can sway their outcomes. So they quickly work out that it's in their interest to get a good sample rate. There is also the key is I think not to rely on email surveys. It's important to sample immediately after the experience is over. Not even a few hours later. Customers just move on. The interaction they had with you was only a small part of their lives, and if it's not particularly bad or good, as restaurators don't bother responding, thinking it wasn't a noteworthy enough experience. They're important, but I'd say the single most important thing is if you do the phone call back within 24 hours in our case, from the supervisor to the customer to say, in our case we call back the ones who scored us poorly, so 0 to 6 out of 10 in the would you recommend question answer. If you call them back within 24 hours, it has even though you're calling back on something that didn't go well, it has an incredibly reinforcing experience that you really do care about what they think. And if it's a real live person who's genuinely interested in why they gave the score without any sort of judgment or trying to convince them to change their mind, the customer thinks, wow, they really care. And I think what a lot of companies forget is when they do those sort of anonymised surveys after the event, the person responds and they send back one of those trite sort of we value your feedback type responses. It just says to the customer, you don't value my feedback. And they hear no more. And they won't do the survey again because they feel it's pointless, and their voice hasn't been heard by the organisation. But when someone calls so quickly, who's genuinely interested, and asks open questions to understand why, it's got a really powerful reinforcing effect.
So if we could turn to the other thing that you guys do, which I haven't seen anybody else do in the same way. It's that sort of interplay of onshore versus offshore and graduates and millennials and fixed term contracts. Tell me more about the hub.
Well, I guess for us it's part of our brand, because we saw ourselves as doing the opposite to our competitors. Where they zig, we zag. In our industry, both in the telecom business as well as the IT industry, tens of thousands of jobs being sent offshore to the India and elsewhere for customer service, and we saw an opportunity to do the opposite of our competitors. We were inspired by what we saw in a very small number of examples of what could be done onshore, but you had to do exceptionally well because you are, after all, have a cost base that's probably 3 times for an employee what it would be if the same role had been overseas. We spent a lot of time understanding what a young person in their early 20s, mid-20s, maybe late 20s in some cases, who's just finished their undergraduate degree, what kind of role they would value and what their expectations were. It was fascinating. I mean, one of the things we found was that when I graduated from university, you always looked for a career, not a job for life. That was probably the previous generation. That was probably more the post-war generation. But you still saw it as you wanted a career and you wanted a good job that would lead to another good job in time. But what we've found in our research is that the current generation are not looking for that sort of play. They're actually interested in a role that they'll have excellent training and development, that they see the role being a time frame more like 2 years, although it varies, of course. Some people think of it as a year and a bit, and others might see it as a 3 or 4 year role, but typically 2 years is about the time frame. And they want to do more things in their life, and often their thinking is, I'll do this role for a period, then I'll travel, then I'll do something completely different to even outside the workforce, maybe something to do with the community, or I might have a career. I'll just see how it turns out. What we've done is, with all our new, effectively graduate trainees, although we don't call them that, we call them customer service professionals, with their undergraduate degrees, we say to them, you have a 2-year contract. We commit to a level of training for them over that 2-year period, but they also commit to actually doing the training and passing the exams. We give them automatic pay rises when they pass the exams, and that idea of continual development and continual reward and recognition, and then an end date to this role, has been very powerful, both in terms of getting the right sort of people on board in the first place, people who like to learn and people who like to grow, but also it's had the effect of saying to them, you know what, at the end of 2 years I will graduate professionally from this role, and at the end of 2 years I can then go and do what I want to do next, travel, work. And our experience is about a third of our staff do leave after 2 years. They travel or something. We thought a third would probably leave and go to competitor, which we're totally fine with after the 2 year period. But we've probably found that only a small portion do, and in fact about half of them end up moving to a different role inside Macquarie after 2 years.
Does the program attract the best graduates? I mean, are you able to... Did it at the beginning? Does it now? Have you built some reputation in Sydney around the program?
We've got 2 programs. There's a slight difference between them. One's for more technical people, and one's for people who've got non-technical degrees. And the technical degree program probably does attract the ones who've got stronger technical backgrounds, because they're quite excited about working in a company that does have real career paths in technology. But what we're looking for more than grades at university is we're looking for people who have a genuine customer service gene inside them, who genuinely like serving other people, enjoy it. And it's a bit like in your own family and friend circle. It's not someone who knows how to fix problems with laptops or software, but it's also people that have a style and an approach where you actually enjoy interacting with them after they've helped you with your laptop or your software. It's actually a pleasure you feel good afterwards. Whether the program was a complex one that you really needed them for, or something embarrassingly simple that you probably could have solved yourself if you'd known how. It's the ones where you come away from that experience feeling like it was a good one. And that's the sort of person we're looking for, in their early or mid-20s.
Thank you very much, David. Can I ask you one more question? What's the one thing that you believe that most people don't?
I think that one of the most important pieces is, it's often talked about the idea of an employee value proposition. And, I've certainly spent a lot of time looking at it. I think you do have a unique opportunity when people start out to really craft that and to attract people who believe in that value proposition, as opposed to try and sell it to people who've already come on board with some other sets. And I think people have become, a bit sceptical sometimes of EVPs. They're just things created by the HR department. They sit on websites. I actually have seen that they're very effective. Like with our graduate recruitment I've talked to, you just attract the people who actually want to be there. And Yes, it does mean you miss out on some people that otherwise you would have hired, but what you get is a completely aligned organisation, and I've seen that at times where, you know, there's been some bumps along the road, you've created such a strong culture and such a strong commonality of purpose and expectations that that team of people just carry through that bump without any impact on service or staff.
David, thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
Thank you.
The Melting Pot was hosted by Dominic Monkhouse, and you can find out more about Dom on LinkedIn. Just search for Dominic Monkhouse or his companies, Foundry Media or Foundry 51.